हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए, इस जानकारी के लिए और इस अपडेट के लिए आपका शुक्रिया. All right, well, the latest videos coming out of the country show Islamic regime buildings, statues and mosques being torched, toppled and taken down, not in this one city but across multiple provinces. This is no longer just street protests or sporadic unrest. This is a direct assault on the symbols of clerical power in Iran. From government buildings in Tehran to statues of Qasem Soleimani in Fars, from the Khomeini statue in Iran Sheher to mosques seen as aligned with state authority, the targets are clear and the message is clearer. Iranians are not just chanting against the regime, they are visibly rejecting it. Now, much of this is unfolding under an internet blackout. During these blackouts, access to social media and messaging platforms has been severely restricted, a tactic that the regime has used before to control narratives, disrupt organization and limit the flow of images to the outside world. But even that has not worked this time. Despite the shutdowns, videos have leaked out showing hijabs being burnt, flags being set ablaze and regime property being reduced to rubble. Well, we'll talk about this with our guests and try and understand what should the world make of what's happening in Iran, and what perhaps Donald Trump is going to do is also another important question that we should be worried about at this point in time. Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, former diplomat, is with us on the show. Mr. Raymond Vickery, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, is also joining us all the way from the capital, Washington, D.C. in the United States. Mr. Ali Mohammad Abushbak, Middle East researcher, is joining us from Cairo in Egypt. Last but not the least, Adit Kothari, foreign affairs expert, is also with us on the program to give his insights into what to make of what's happening in Iran. Mr. Vickery, I'll begin with you, sir. Well, the world at this point in time is set in a phase of unease, especially what's happening in Venezuela. And of course, what happened in Minneapolis also has made world headlines. But the fact of the matter is that there was a recent attack in Iran by the Americans related to nukes. But now this is a civil unrest, and the powers that be in Iran are directly accusing Donald Trump of inciting what's going on. If that is the case, what's going to happen next, sir?
Well, thanks very much for having me. Of course, what's going to happen next is a $64 billion question. It seems to me that if you're going to wage peace and try to bring peace, stability, and prosperity to a region or to the world, you have to have a strategy based on principles, and you have to have partners in that endeavor. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has none of that. All they have, as demonstrated in regard to Venezuela, is might is right, and we'll do as we please. It's one thing for the Trump administration to do something on that basis in Venezuela. It's quite a different situation in regard to Iran. The only continual thread which seems to run through the Trump approach is support for Israel and giving Israel a free reign, whether it be Gaza or in Syria, Lebanon, and across the region. This is not an adequate strategy for bringing longer-term peace and prosperity. So it's a very, very dangerous time, exacerbated by the present administration in Washington. As for India, another great democracy, one would hope that India would have a strategy which is oriented toward bringing peace and stability with respect for human rights and the basic principles that independent India has been founded on. I think that India is a great power, and it has influence. And its influence should not be limited just to what's good for India immediately in terms of oil, Chabahar, in terms of Pakistan. All those things have to be considered. But what is the larger interest of India in promoting peace and stability and trying to rein in this Trump administration's view of might is right and we'll do as we please? So it's a very difficult time, and what's going to happen next is the question. And my guess is that this regime is going to be weakened over time and will eventually fall, although it may not be immediate, and that great democracies like India should be prepared to fill in the gap which has been created by the Trump administration approach to international affairs.
You're absolutely right, sir. Ali Mohammed, what do you make of the situation? In fact, Donald Trump has openly said that if protesters are going to be killed, then there is going to be a hit on Iran. This could spiral further out of control. Now, it's important to understand, Ali, that there have been protests in Iran in the last few years as well, and we've all been following them. But this time it feels a little different. Why is that so?
Thank you for having me. Things is the situation itself and the time is different from the previous. First, second, this is unprecedented protest in the history of after the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So this is unprecedented protest in Iran, and several of cities are participating in this protest against the regime. And it's worth mentioning that several of cities in Iran, like Isfahan, Tehran, like Mashhad and Kermanshah, and etc., are participating and joining in this protest, which consider one of the largest protests have been witnessed in Iran since the Islamic Revolution. This is on one second. Second things, and I guess the demand of the civilians is different. They were like previous protests, they were protesting against the election or protesting against some hijab and etc. But today they are demanding and asking for reforming the economy, reforming the civilians' life, the citizen life, as well as the social life. So Iran now is in very tough place, especially the regime itself. Also, the time of this, nowadays there is no exist for Bashar al-Assad regime in Middle East. We are talking about all the Iranian proxy in the area are weakened nowadays. We are talking about Hamas in Gaza. It's also deeply impacted in the war. Hezbollah, it's no present and absent in this atmosphere in Middle East, especially after the war and assassinating Hassan Nasrallah, the supreme leader of Hezbollah, and after the bombardment in Yemen, Houthi, Ansarullah al-Houthi, they are limiting their bombardment or their attack in the Red Sea. As you know that there is an agreement between America and Ansarullah al-Houthi to not target American ship in Red Sea. So all of this atmosphere making Iran nowadays more weak, and also supporting, it's not only America who's supporting the protest, and this is the right for the civilians to participate and demanding on the street what they are asking for. All the international community supporting the civilians demand and civilians right to ask for the change. But here the question, Iran is more than weak than before. Why? Because after the 11 days war between Israel and Iran, the Iranian regime have been deeply impacted. I asked several of Iranian after the 11 days war. They confirm me the government have been deeply impacted, and several of things have been damaged inside the Iranian regime. So also we are talking about Iraq. There is no exist for the Iranian progress in Iraq. So all the atmosphere is ready for waging a war against Iran in case they are going to force the civilians and attack the civilians who took the street peacefully and protest peacefully against the economic policy and against the Iranian policy. Worth mentioning that also the day before yesterday, the foreign ministry of Iran had been visited Lebanon at this time. So there is a several of a question, and he met a Lebanese foreign minister instead of meeting Hezbollah, Hezbollah's leader. What's the significant message that Iran it's want to share it and want to show it for the
Okay.
international community? Is Iran going to rely on the the officially recognized by the international communities instead of depending on the proxy, or instead of depending on
All
the
right, fair enough. I understand your point. Let me also rope in Ambassador Sajdev into this conversation. Ambassador Sajdev, what do you make of what's happening over here for India? Of course, this is a point of concern. It is a development, or rather a string of developments which are to be noted. The instability in Iran also sparks concerns related to the Chabahar port. That's another worry that India will definitely keep in mind. But sir, what has been your observation of what's happening in Iran?
Thank you for having me. The situation in Iran is serious and worrisome, but I would not put it in an alarmistic manner. There is considerable media fog. There are various versions, quite motivated in their own way. Many of the Western agencies would like to portray that and make it self-fulfilling prophecy to have Iran come to a moment of truth and the regime tottering to a fall. But let me also say at the moment that doesn't seem to be the case. Iranian government, as I have said at your channel before, has perfected over the last 45 years a fairly sophisticated playbook to handle such disturbances which have been occurring at a regular interval. They first try to repress the demonstrations and protests. Then, if it continues, then they deploy a good cop versus bad cop routine. Some in the government talk tough, and some others want moderation, assure that the genuine grievances would be handled, etc., etc. And that confuses the demonstrators and protesters, and eventually the protests subside. In due course, the leaders of the protesters are tried and given long sentences, even executed. So this has happened at least since 2009, when there were protests about falsified presidential elections. Then there were, during the past 5-6 years, there have been cases of petrol prices rise, and Mahisa Amini's protests about niqab and hijab, and now this one. Each time we are made to believe by vested interests outside that these protests are unprecedented and the regime is at the verge of falling. This time, as other panelists have also mentioned, there is some truth about proxies having fallen by the wayside, Iran having suffered debilitating
Right, sir. So stay with us. We have some breaking news to talk
war.
about, where there is escalating unrest being reported. Iranian authorities have announced widespread school closures, shifting classes online across multiple provinces. Schools in Isfahan and East Azerbaijan will hold non-face-to-face classes, with the kindergartens and preschools also shut. In the capital, the University of Tehran has moved classes online from the 10th of January to 14th. The exams will continue in person. The move signals heightened caution by the state as protests continue to spread. All right, like I said, this is a very volatile situation in Iran at this point in time, and like Ambassador Mahesh also said, that there is a media fog, Adit, that has also descended upon Iran. No information is going out. Whatever is trickling in does not paint a very, very good picture for the current regime that is. But they have survived similar protests in the past as well. But do you think that the scale and scope is at a different stratosphere at this time?
A similar protest, yes, Vineet, but this one is far more longer. It has far more legs. And the kind of sporadic protests that we see across the cities, I think 100 cities or so, 340 protests at the time, with the morale of the IRGC, in my opinion, which is very, very low at this point, which is the biggest threat to the current regime. I think that is what is very concerning. Geopolitically, internationally, I think that is what people should be worrying about. So now, if that happens and there is a regime change, it basically throws the world into a complete disbalance. Short-term disbalance, yes. Long-term, we do not know if the Pahlavi dynasty or the Pahlavi, the Rezas will be able to conjure up and engineer themselves as and stake the claim as legitimate heirs to the original Mohammed Pahlavi Rezvi. So, having said that, I do agree with Raymond when he says that the U.S. May not agree with the rule-based order, but Iran is a different ball game altogether. It's a hotter plate. But when things are being engineered from within, when there is a population within the country which is enraged and already on the streets, we have seen it multiple number of times, whether that be Bangladesh or any other country. The US has taken advantage of it and has tried to engineer or play their sort of game, and that is the kind of worry. Now, from an Indian perspective, where does that leave the $500 million dollars of investment in Chabahar? I think from a short-term perspective, yes, we are looking at some sort of risk. Even from a security standpoint, there is a considerable amount of risk. But from a long-term perspective, whichever government comes into place, we have to bear in mind that the government's, it's the nation's interest which will play at large. So, from hindsight, from testimonies of previous incidents, India has been able to play very well with countries where there's been a regime change, including that of Afghanistan. So even if there is a regime change or if there are security issues with Chabahar, I think it's going to be more from a short-term perspective. From a long-term perspective, I think India is in a good place to be able to mitigate it and follow suit from a strategy perspective. India shouldn't bother.
All right, Adit, hold on to that thought. Let me come back to you. A strong warning now from Iran's Attorney General. Authorities have declared that anyone taking part in the protest will be treated as an enemy of God, a charge under Iranian law that carries the death penalty. The statement signals a sharp escalation by the regime as it moves from crowd control to criminalizing dissent using religious law, a step seen by rights group as a prelude to a harsher crackdown. Tehran is on a high alert tonight. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, carried out overnight ground operations across the capital in what authorities describe as clearing and security sweeps. Let me in fact get a word in from Adit once again. Adit, what does this mean? The religious group obviously wants to punish people by death if they continue to protest. Do you think that international powers need to in fact weigh in on what are the crisis imbuing in Iran in terms of the human rights cost there?
Well, I think Donald Trump has already been on record to say that if there are human rights excesses, they could exercise some sort of a NATO level exercise within Iran. That only remains to be seen what kind of human rights excesses the current regime indulges in and engages in. But having said that, we know that the regime in itself, is known down to, curb protests in a very strategic manner. The only issue here is the IRGC guards themselves. How is their morale at this point, which I do not see it very firmly with the regime. So if the lower level cadre of the IRGC falls out, then I think they do not have much strategy to actually control the protesters. So I think that's what we need to wait and see, Vinny.
Well, a defiant statement now from Iran's foreign minister has come out. He has stated, and I quote, "We'd rather die an honorable death than live on our knees." The remark underscores the regime's hardline stance as protests continue to challenge the Islamic Republic. The comment signals no sign of compromise from Tehran, even as pressure mounts both on the streets from the international community. Let me, in fact, quickly rope in Mr. Vikri as well into this conversation. Mr. Vikri, Donald Trump had promised, when he got elected, that he's not going to meddle into the affairs of any country. He is not going to invade anyone. In fact, he was very livid with his predecessor for getting into wars which directly impact the exchequer, the taxpayer in the United States, but has gone on to do the complete opposite of what his manifesto promised. Do you think that Trump is perhaps itching to get into Iran as well now?
Well, I think that there is no limit on the ego of President Trump. You're quite right. He said that he was going to bring peace around the world. He was going to solve Ukraine on day one. He wasn't going to try nation building. He was going to only look at America first, which apparently at that time meant within the present boundaries of the United States of America. Instead, he's taken this strongman approach, my way or the highway. I think that basically he sees the world only in power politics terms. He looks at Iran as something which can be bombed into some sort of submission. He said that he doesn't want to put boots on the ground there, but he has said also, as you pointed out, that if civilians are killed, that he's going to intervene. And evidently what he has in mind is some sort of airstrikes, as he did during the previous attack on nuclear facilities. But that's not a strategy. That's a transactional approach. It's not a way forward to building peace and prosperity in a long term. And as I said earlier, it seems to me that what needs to happen is great democracies like India and Western Europe and Japan need to act in a concert with basic principles of trying to build a long-term peace and prosperity, because it's not going to come from the United States under the Trump administration. Indeed, it may exacerbate the problem by backing Israel to the hilt.
Right. You're absolutely right. Well, we've run out of time. Appreciate everybody who joined in and shared their perspective on this very sensitive information coming out of Iran at this point in time. And before we wrap up,